Having reviewed as best I could the very little that was available on the subject of life beyond in the Earth life system data, I decided that reversion to a personal inventory was the only way. What I was seeking had become a kind of death insurance, and personal circumstances now indicated that the need for this was pressing. My core self told me it was not as difficult as I seemed to think it was, and with this in mind I began my search. There was a small group of those whom I knew well that I had actually contacted after their physical exit during an out-of-body experience. This group included my father, who died after a year of incoherent suffering as the result of a stroke. I had found him in a small room with one window, apparently recuperating, and he had extended warm greetings. There were also an engineer friend, Charlie, who died after a heart attack and whom I discovered in a cabin on an ocean shore, my pilot and research friend Agnew, whom I met months after his fatal plane crash in what appeared to be a research laboratory, very excited about a new project, and Dick, my MD friend, who died from abdominal cancer, and whom I found looking younger and fit, talking with two other men in what seemed an office. I also briefly met my mother, although this was not during an OBE. She appeared in the front passenger seat of my car as I was driving to work, just a few minutes after she died in an Ohio hospital. There were others, but none I knew as well as these. As I traced what they were, as I knew them, an interesting fact emerged. Not one had been locked into a post-mortem belief system. But where had they gone? And how did they get there? After all those years, I had not taken the trouble to find out. While considering this, I came to realize how very few wrought-in-steel belief systems my parents had forced on me. There had been no fire and brimstone, no devils or angels, no preaching about an afterlife, only the process of self-determination. Neither they nor I at the time realized how valuable their attitude was. During nightly runs, I began to search to discover what had happened to those I had met after their Earth life system sojourn. About 3 a.m, after 2 sleep cycles, I was fully rested and relaxed. I rolled out, and with the thought I was in the blackness outside and near my physical body. It took a moment to home in on the edge of the H-band. Backing away from the H-band noise, I began to look for those who had not possessed a strong post-mortem belief system. Charlie came first to mind, and with a light, quick-switch focus, I was in his self-created, non-physical cabin by the ocean. It was like being in a still picture. The sandy beach appeared normal, but the cabin was empty. The clouds were immobile in the sky, and the sun seemed stationary. There was no ocean breeze. Charlie was gone. If he had been there, everything would have been in motion. Then I noticed what to me was an anomaly. I could feel sand under my feet. I looked down. My feet were there, bare feet. I wiggled my toes and dug them in the sand. It was altogether natural. To one side was a stretch of grass. I walked, not floated, over to the grass and stepped on it. It felt just like real grass. I bent down and plucked a blade, belatedly realizing I also had a hand. I put the grass in my mouth and chewed. The taste and texture were real. It was indeed grass, living and growing. The Charlie I knew never indicated he could create living organisms. Yet here was the evidence. And there was my automatic assumption of a physical form, which was unusual to say the least. What kind of energy field had Charlie generated? It was certainly not a belief system, as I had not been conditioned to expect what I found. As I left, slowly and deliberately, my sense of a physical body faded. I checked the location and found it was just inside the H-band noise barrier, within the human radiation band of the M-field spectrum. In the following weeks, I tried to discover where Charlie had gone. Try as I might, I could find no trace of him anywhere. The next person I sought was my father. Owing to the stroke, he had suffered very deep pain for a full year, and had been unable to communicate his problem before he died. I discovered this when I found him previously, soon after his death. It was easy for me to find the room where he had been recuperating, but as I half expected, he was not there. The room was empty, but I could reach out and touch the wall with my hand. Why did I suddenly materialize my hand? The wall was rough, like concrete or adobe. The father I knew could not have built it. So either I didn't know my father as well as I thought I did, or someone else created the room. As I moved slowly out of the top of the small building, my perception changed back to purely non-physical. I was not surprised that the H-band noise wave was not far away. Later I tried, but failed, to find out where my father was. Had both he and Charlie returned to the Earth life system? Or had their I-there retrievers picked them up? And what was this place where both cabin and room stood empty since their departure? As I felt before, it was too real for a belief system. My curiosity was on the alert. I made another run some days later into an adjacent area that brought a similar result. I rediscovered the place where I had found Agnew several months after he had crashed and burned in his light aircraft while trying to land at a small Ohio airport. It was at Agnew's funeral in North Carolina where a vivid and hitherto unexplained event had happened. Just as his casket was being lowered into the grave, a low-flying Twin Beach aircraft flew over the site. It was exactly the same model, with the same color and markings as the one Agnew had flown. It waggled its wings and flew off into the distance. His widow broke into sobs, and all of us who knew him were moved to tears. Later, we checked all airports within a radius of 300 miles. There were no records of any Twin Beach takeoffs or landings. With this in mind, I was not optimistic that I would find this creative type at the same non-physical site. When I'd found him previously, soon after his death, he had been working excitedly on something he couldn't explain to me. I was right. This time the platform and rigging were there, but not Agnew. I didn't try to locate him. There were too many possibilities. Next, I focused on where I had found Dick after his death. He had been a good doctor and friend in my early days in New York. When I had seen him, he had been in deep conversation with several men in a large room, and he had simply given me a wave of acknowledgement. He had looked half the age he was when he had died. I reached this same large room with no problem. To my surprise, it was not empty. Two normal-looking men in business suits were standing by a table in casual conversation. I approached them carefully. "Excuse me, but could you give me any information about Dick Gordon?" They turned and stared at me wide-eyed. Then the taller one spoke. "I'm sorry, we weren't expecting you. Do you need to sit down? Are you tired?" "No, I'm fine. I only want—" "Wait a minute, George," the second man interrupted. "This one's different, look." They examined me intently. George shook his head. "You still have a living physical body?" I hesitated. "Well, yes, I do, but—" "And you know you're not dreaming?" "Yes, I know. I'm trying to—" "Amazing!" George reached out, grabbed my hand, and shook it vigorously. "I've heard about people like you, but you're the first we've met. What about this, Fred?" "But exactly what is this place?" It was Fred who replied. "This is a place where certain people come when they've died, with little help sometimes. Most of them don't know it exists." "What people?" "Medical types, physicians, surgeons, and so on." "Why do they come here?" "To calm down after the big change," George explained. "They need it especially because they've been so locked into keeping patients alive, but they recover quickly in a familiar environment. Look around." I became aware that I was in a typical doctor's office. Waiting room with chairs, coffee tables, and stacks of old magazines. Through a glass window, I could see the nurse's desk and file cabinets. An inner office with desk and chairs was visible through an open doorway, and on the far side of this, I glimpsed a room with examining tables, scales, and other equipment. I turned to the two men. "Who put this together? Did you?" "We don't know," Fred replied. "It was here when we arrived. It's an artifact created simply to help the medical mind adjust to the change. It's so familiar, that's why it works." "Are you the only ones here?" "Well, there are several hundred at least just in the receiving area. They're the ones that stay and help. They come and go all the time." I turned to George. "How did you get here?" "Well, I was sitting in the park, and Fred here came up and sat beside me, and then—" "What's the matter? Are you all right?" He must have seen the shock on my face as the wave of memory flowed into me. The park. Years ago, I had arrived at the park, but how or why I got there I could not recall. There had been a welcoming group of 10 or 12 men and women who greeted me warmly and explained where I was. It was a place to calm down after the trauma of physical death, a way station for relaxation and decision as to what to do next. The park. Finally, I managed to speak. "I'm fine. Tell me, where is this park?" It was Fred who answered. There was a softness in his face as he looked at me. "That is what you're looking for, isn't it?" "I don't know, but I think it is." He waved his arm at the door behind him. "Just go out, turn left, and follow the path through the woods. It's not far." I was deeply grateful. Thank you both. I may see you again, even if I'm not a doctor." George patted my shoulder. "Come back when you get a chance. If you find a lonely physician, bring him along too." I went outside, turned left, and there indeed was a woods with tall trees, most of them familiar to me. A path led through an opening, and I followed it. Although I was eager to hurry, I decided to remain walking. The feel of the leaves and grass against the soles of my feet was much too good. My feet were bare. As I walked on, a gentle breeze touched my head and chest. I could feel. Just as with my bare feet, I could feel. I passed oaks, poplars, hickories, sycamores, chestnuts, pines, and cedars, even an incongruous palm tree, and trees I never knew existed. The scent of the blooms mixed with that of rich loam was wonderful. I could smell. And the birds. About half of them were species I'd never seen before. They were singing, chirping, calling, flying from tree to tree, and sweeping across my path. Hundreds of them. And I could hear. I walked more slowly in wonderment. My hand, yes, my physical hand again, reached out and plucked a leaf from the low branch of a maple. It felt alive and flexible. I put it in my mouth and chewed. It was moist and tasted exactly like the maple leaves of my childhood. Suddenly I knew what had happened, what was probably still taking place. This was a human creation. Many of those who walked this path created and added their own favorite bird or tree to the woods. They were alive, living creations created by humans. They were not the standard reproductive mode followed in the Earth life system, which is really not human-created, but the idea and plan of someone else. And all the rest of it behind me in my search was the same. The product of a human mind consciousness. The medical haven, Agnew's rigging, my father's recuperation room, and Charlie's cabin by the ocean. Charlie, I remembered, had even demonstrated how he put it together. All human creation. The basic. I know of the existence of our Creator, but are all of us really creators out of the same mold? Is my core self I accepted so casually a minuscule replica or clone of the original? How far can we take this only partially expressed idea? As if to prove the point of reality, a large orange parrot flew over my shoulder, chirped, and released a white dropping in my hand as he passed. I laughed as I tested the warm consistency of it between thumb and forefinger. It was certainly real. I walked on, wondering how many human-created animal friends were in the woods, when I came to a bend in the path, and the trees ended. Before me was the park. It was the same as when I had visited many years ago, with winding walks, benches, flowers and shrubbery, different colored grass lawns, clusters of stately trees, small streams and fountains, and with a warm sun overhead among small cumulus clouds. The park continued on a gently rolling terrain as far as I could see. As I walked down the slope to the nearest bench, I wondered what human mind or group of humans put this together. It was a magnificent creation for a lowly human. Yet I knew this was the way it had come into existence. But I had not thought of such things on my previous visit those years ago. Now I remembered. I knew why it was here. A woman rose from the bench as I approached. She was of medium height, slender, with large brown eyes and dark brown, slight wavy hair under her shoulders. Her face was smooth and lightly tanned, with features that seemed to have touches of the Orient, the Middle East, and Europe. She was wearing dark slacks and a hip-length jacket. Her age might be anything between 35 and 50. She was familiar. I had met her somewhere before. She smiled and held out her hand. "At last you are here. Welcome back, Ashenine." Ashenine, my name, remembered from another lifetime. It told me a lot about her. I took her hand, which was real enough to feel. She led me to the bench, and we sat down. Other people strolled by, all of them adults, wearing a variety of clothing. Some glanced curiously at us. I wondered why, until I realized there was a subtle difference they could perceive between my appearance and theirs. I caught the woman's eye, and she smiled again. A half-memory floated in. "This jacket you're wearing. I was wearing it last time you were here. I thought it might help you to remember." I nodded, but my memory was hazy. She was among the dozen people I met last time. That I was sure of. I looked at her and saw that she was smiling. Could she read my thoughts? "Yes, of course I can. And you can read mine." "Who are you?" "I am only the messenger. I am to tell you that you may by all means bring people to us, those who are newly physically dead. We will take care of them. That is why we are here. And you may teach others to do this." "How can I teach something that will seem so strange?" "We are sure you can. Many of them are probably doing it now. All you need to do is help them remember. It is a wholly objective way to remove the fear of physical death. And let them know they do survive the death process." "Certainly. Also, it would help them become aware of the many options they have. There are many even you have not considered, Ashenine. Or would you prefer we call you Robert?" "Robert or Bob, please. My physical friends call me Bob. The name Ashenine might trouble them." "Some may know you by the old name." "I'm becoming aware of that. And I'm trying to recall your name. You are the wife of..." Elion, yes, Elion. Mate is a better word. You are Nevis. Good. Now, I need some help. The places I visited, where my friends were, they are simply extensions of here, are they? That is so. But if they have a strong belief, they will follow that directive and go where that belief leads them. There will be others of the same belief waiting to help them. You let them go and leave them alone. That is where they belong. But all this is not just another belief, is it? Nevis laughed. Not in the usual sense. There are no beliefs involved, only experience. The design here is only to provide a familiar surrounding to ease the anxiety. This place, then, is a creation that is here and will be here whatever your beliefs. It will not disappear if you don't believe it exists. Who made it? A human civilization many thousands of years ago. They have been gone long since. Is there anything more you need to know? What about those who simply want or need to return to what I've called their I there? I'm sure you understand what I mean. I do. That is the destination of most who depart from here. So when we bring people here, you calm them down and give them the opportunity to consider what they want to do next. That is so. We show them what opportunities do exist. The park is but a starting point. You will be astounded when you see all of the little individual places that residents have created. Are there rules? Only one. No imposition of one will upon another. Thank you for your help. I have much to do, it seems. You will find it easier than you think, Bob. This knowledge of here, of where to go at death, where to meet, this knowledge before the event, it gives ultimate freedom. It does? I see you are receiving a signal to return. Yes. There is so much more to learn here, but I must go. I have one more question. No need to ask. The creative processes whose results you have observed are already known to us as human, and your father did construct his own room. There was no need to ask. Tana Sen. You have remembered. A goodbye phrase from 100,000 years ago. Tana Sen. The return was easy and uneventful. I did indeed have much to do.